So today we are presenting 7-point plan for migrating Oracle applications to cloud. It will be presented by Srinivas Chitrapu and Vikas Kodari. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any question during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring them up during the presentation, and we'll also have times for question at the end. So now, without further ado, I'll turn this over to the presenters. Our presenter today, as I mentioned earlier, are Srinivas Chitrapu and Vikas Kodari. Srinivas is an experienced technology leader with demonstrated history of working in the information technology and services industry. In SuneraTech, he is our cloud BU head focusing on digital transformation, cloud migration, and cloud managed services. Vikas Kodari is our cloud technical expert with extensive knowledge across Oracle IS, PaaS, SaaS, EBS, Taleo, and BI solutions. Over to you, Srinivas and Vikas.
Thank you, Gayatri. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining. So, if you're attending this webinar today, the likelihood is that you're already planning to move applications to cloud. You have some plan in place, or you're thinking about moving your applications to cloud. So, what we're going to do is break it up into 3 parts. The first is why move Oracle applications to cloud? But the bulk of this webinar is to go into the 7 key considerations when you're moving your Oracle applications to cloud. What are the key points to ensure success in your migration journey? We'll also talk about how you can leverage our programs and migrate at 0 cost. So that's something key and helps you develop a business case. We'll bring it all with a case study towards the end, and of course, talk about the next steps. Like Gayatri said, please ask your questions in the chat session. We will dedicate the last 15-20 minutes of this presentation to questions, so you can have more of a live Q&A. So a little bit about SuneraTech. Like Gayatri mentioned, we are the #1 Oracle Cloud Velocity partner. We have over 300 team members who are focused on Oracle Cloud, either managing Oracle Cloud, migrating applications to cloud, or developing applications in cloud. We have over 300 customers, of which half of them are cloud customers whom we have migrated entire data centers for, or just specific workloads. When it comes to Oracle Cloud, we have partnered with our customers and won 2 innovation awards as recently as this past Oracle Open World for the efforts in migrating their data center, EBS, PeopleSoft applications to cloud. And one of those will be covered in the case study as well. All in all, we have migrated over 700 workloads to cloud. Oracle applications, IBM applications, Microsoft workloads, and others as well. We are a global company, obviously presence in the US and North America, in Canada and India as well. And we do have presence in Europe and Australia as well. So a little bit about cloud, from a more strategic perspective before we deep dive into today's conversation. Ultimately, everyone knows that cloud is about being able to execute digital transformation. Data is a new currency. Companies want to be agile. They want to be flexible. And it's pretty clear that, the old way of doing IT is getting a bit old and is slowing down business. So as we look at, the ultimate vision, which is digital experience, which is essentially companies being able to access business process as a service, functions as a service, plug and play capabilities. In order to be able to get there, which is, kind of a horizon 4, most companies have to start at horizon 1. This is essentially infrastructure as a service. For those of you already familiar with cloud, we've got infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and then moving beyond that, you go to business process as a service. Horizon 1 is typically where most cloud journeys begin. You're migrating your applications to an infrastructure-based platform, whether it be Oracle Cloud or AWS or Azure. Once you've migrated your applications to infrastructure as a service, all that's changed is basically you moved your data center, you've gone from an on-prem or a colo model to a cloud model. But beyond that, once you've got all your data and your applications in cloud, you can now leverage capabilities like data lakes to be able to converge all your data and build on top of it. So that's your horizon 2. So you move from infrastructure to more of a data-driven environment. Beyond that, you're looking at DevOps. So that's been a buzzword for the last few years. But when you have your applications in cloud, when you have your data in cloud, when you have the ability to execute quickly, you can then, you can call it digital operations or DevOps. But this is where, IT becomes more of a enabler rather than a support structure. And once you pass Horizon 3, you can easily plug and play different capabilities. So whether you're using an IoT platform like eSeal, or an ERP solution like Meltag, or a chatbot solution like ServiceNext, you can just plug and play that into your infrastructure, into your environment, and enable your business. So that essentially is the 4 horizons, and again, more of a strategic look at cloud. So zooming in a bit, why migrate Oracle applications to Oracle Cloud? So it's a cloud, but then there's definitely benefits for migrating Oracle applications to Oracle Cloud. I know many companies want to look at Azure and AWS, and those are very feasible options as well. So the first thing at a high level is agility. You can scale your infrastructure. You can provision environments on demand. So you can scale up and down based on your business requirements, based on your business cycles. You can provision a test or a QA environment for a new project or for an upgrade test. The next is infrastructure modernization. Almost everyone has a dreaded life cycle of 3 to 5 years where a tech refresh comes up, and now you're trying to upgrade your hardware, your operating system, and you got a lot of tech debt that needs to be cleared. By moving to cloud, you avoid, I guess, a lot of the tech debt. The next, hyper automation. That's again something that's come up. It's one of the top 5 trends that Gartner expects to see in 2020. And hyper automation essentially is robotic process automation, true DevOps, and being able to automate your testing. DevOps model where you're doing continuous integration, continuous deployment, you're only as fast as how quickly you're able to test your modules and your changes. Certainly lower total cost of ownership. A lot of companies are moving to cloud to get away from the data center overhead, to be able to move away from some of the mundane tasks associated with managing infrastructure, and that corresponding reduces the cost of ownership. And it's something else we touch upon through this presentation is, once you move your applications to cloud, because of the tools and processes available, you can simplify your integration. You can simplify the way you customize your applications as well. So at this point, we'll go into the 7 key points to consider when migrating our applications to cloud. The first, your application database version and release. We'll get into details on what and why. The second, customizations, integrations. So this is very key because you're really moving just one workload. You're typically moving multiple workloads. And without the right integration, you don't want your functionality to break once moved to cloud. The next is current operating system and infrastructure. This has a great influence on the bill of materials that you can leverage. This significantly influences whether you're able to do a lift and shift or you have to do some kind of a re-platform or re-architecture. The fourth is security. Certainly there's a lot of security considerations when you're having your applications hosted on-prem. But when you move to cloud, there's additional considerations that come into play because your data is more pervasive now. You're exposing your data to a lot more consumer base, which is the purpose of cloud, to make it much easier to access your data, but you got to make sure your security points are covered there. The next is data protection and backup and recovery. The way it's done in cloud is quite different from the traditional on-prem model of using tape libraries and tape backup. Sixth is business continuity and disaster recovery, how they go hand in hand. And of course, ultimately the migration plan. So steps, all the considerations 1 through 6 will lead up to your migration plan. It'll drive the waves that you migrate in. It'll drive your timeline. And of course, it'll drive your costs as well. So one of the things we're going to do today is, as we go through these 7 points, we're going to use the example of EBS. So it kind of gives you a real life way to look at what each of those mean when you're migrating a specific application. So if you look at EBS, there's 3 ways you can essentially manage EBS, right? Host it. One is traditional on-prem model, right? Which you want to move away from. The other is you can migrate to AWS or Azure, Google platform potentially. And of course, the third is to move it into Oracle Cloud. When it comes to EBS particularly, when you do your analysis, when you look at your licensing costs, when you're looking at performance, portability, when you're looking at the capability of database as a service, it kind of starts pointing towards Oracle Cloud, unless your organization has already made a decision to move to AWS Azure, which are totally viable and feasible. Oracle Cloud seems to be the best platform for supporting Oracle EBS. And as you'll see over here, from Oracle Cloud to on-prem, the complexity kind of increases, in terms of the number of moving parts, the integrations required. And if you look at the ROI and value, return on investment, that increases as you move from on-prem down to Oracle Cloud. So next is, the current application database version and release and why it's important. So Vikas, can you elaborate on, why the current stack is important and how it drives the migration plan?
Thanks, Srini. Hello, everyone. My name is Vikas. So I'm into a pure delivery and implementation and in terms of Oracle EBS and edge applications from SuneraTech. So typically on-prem, you would be in one of these three EBS versions, which can be supported version or sustained version or unsupported. So if you talk about supported, you will be on 12.1 or 12.2 EBS, or if it is sustained, it should be 11i. And if it is, if it is a sustained, it is a 12.1, or unsupported, it will be 11i. So either of these versions you will be in. Either of these versions you will be in currently. So based on which you are in currently, so you go through the step 1 to step 6. So if you're in supported version, you understand so what to do, the pre-migration and transfer with different migration options, and then go to the cutover and production, right? And so ideally the target stack on your Oracle Cloud would be your 12.2.8 or 12.2.9, which is released recently, or 12.2.3 or 12.1.3 application version. And the underlying database would be 12.1 or 11.2, and corresponding OS and other application version.
Yeah, I think if I could just add to this, essentially what happens is if you're on a supported stack, right, you're migrating EBS again, using that as an example and why the current versions matter. If you're on a supported version, all right, it's as simple as executing the pre-migration, applying your tech stack, copying your data over, either using, an RMAN backup or transportable table spaces. At that point, you build your new environment in cloud. And then step 4 is when you're copying the delta over and cutting over to production. You don't have to worry about an upgrade or anything. You're fully supported. It really is a lift and shift. If you're in sustain again, ideally you want to upgrade at some point. Some organizations want to upgrade prior to migration. Some want to upgrade post. But typically upgrading during the migration is not recommended because you don't want to put in too many moving parts. So in an unsupported system, so if your current release is not supported, ideally you want to upgrade up front and then complete the remaining tasks. So you upgrade to a supported version or at least to a sustained version and then continue the rest of the steps. Again, why does the current OS matter? Because if you're on Linux today and you're on a supported version, you can leverage EBS Cloud Manager for migrating. You can do more of a traditional lift and shift. If you're on Solaris, AIX, HPUX, if you're looking to do a cross-platform, so you're moving from Solaris or HPUX or AIX to Oracle Linux, then you got to start looking at cross-platform transportable table spaces combined with backups. Right, so it drives your, and obviously increases the complexity as well. Now again, using EBS as an example, in both these situations, you can use database cloud service. or you could use a traditional Exadata cloud service, a bare metal or a VM, and deploy your databases on top of that. Go ahead, Vikas.
Yeah. So thanks, Srini. So this is the roadmap that Oracle is investing continuously in Oracle EBS. So this is where you can see the extended support and the premier support for the versions that you are right now. So in August 2019, 12.9 is already released, and you also have that in place. So yeah, this is about the continuous investment that Oracle is doing in Oracle EBS Oracle EBS, apart from the SaaS and other products. So we just want to outline this, like if you're thinking in those terms, you don't have to worry about moving to cloud where your current version is right now. If you have any questions.
Yeah, I think we can take a few questions now that we covered a little bit of ground. Any questions coming in, Gayatri, on the Q&A?
Anyone, any questions you can fill in the chat? I can take it up.
All right, nothing, we'll move.
Continue, Srinivas. Probably we'll have at the end of the session. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So as Srini pointed out, the 7 key considerations before. So this is one of the crucial stage where you will be in a dilemma what to do and what to do with certain customizations, certain integrations, and certain the user perspective. How do they adapt to the new changes, right? So these are the 9 top considerations, I would say, when you decide whether to upgrade or whether to just move as is based on your sustained support and unsupported versions of your EBS. Okay, so decide, like before you start anything, like you decide whether you want to upgrade or re-implement or just push as is depending on your version. Also, if you want to add new modules to your existing application modules, you can do it. I mean, you do the upgrade first and then add new modules up on top of that. Okay, and there are certain things where if you're moving from 11a or 12.1 to 12.8 or 12.9, so there could be some features that you can leverage as part of the standard functionality, rather if you have any customizations done to that. So you can also plan and understand what are the current features that are available in the new release, and then adapt them as per your business requirement. And also the customizations where you have to, there are certain things where which can be deprecated or which can be not supported in the current release. So for those items, you might have to upgrade to a certain level. Let's say if Oracle reports are supported, one of the versions 10G or 11G in 11A or 12, you might have to retrofit or do Chemly redemption in terms of moving it to the current release. Okay, the most important and the most time-consuming part of would be the testing. So how would I test end-to-end functionality when it moves to the current version, and that is one. And if you're upgrading, and what is the the things that needs to be performed, that needs to be tested in terms of performance, in terms of functionality, in terms of reporting, and all, right? And in a given point,
I think so. Just
go ahead,
thanks. So ultimately, why is this important? Because the more the customization, the more the considerations when you upgrade. It's just something to think about. And the more the integrations, the more the complexity. So this is not a challenge. It just needs to be addressed as a key consideration we have ways of capturing all the customizations and ensuring that they continue post-upgrade as well. So your functionality and business process doesn't get impacted. Moving on to the next one, the current infrastructure, ultimately it comes down to cost, and your current infrastructure is going to drive your bill of materials. You know, depending on whether you're running in physical systems or virtual machines, there's a complete sizing aspect, converting your current number of CPUs and cores to OCPUs, and then deciding whether you require dense IO, bare metal, or accelerated cloud service potentially. Also driving the BOM is whether you want to use block storage, object storage, archive storage, some combination of, or possibly even file storage. And then ultimately, the current infrastructure is important because depending on the number of network zones and network complexity, this will drive how you architect your cloud solution with firewalls and load balancing. So you can put a firewall, getting into your Oracle Cloud tenancy, and then additional firewalls between your trusted and untrusted zones, or in some cases, folks call it, DMZ, and the backend. So there's another consideration. The next one key is your data protection and your backup and recovery policy. As everyone knows, there is no tape backup option in cloud, and none of the cloud providers have a tape backup option. So you're going to be backing up to object storage. That's going to be a primary platform for backup. And from object storage, you typically will stream your data to archive storage for long-term retention, which is significantly cheaper as well. So this is a design consideration. Block being your primary storage for applications, object being your first landing spot for backups, and archive being for long-term retention. If you're using database cloud service, there's obviously a choice of using database backup service that's available right off of Oracle's website, and it's a feature you can turn on. The other thing to keep in mind is whether you want to use a native cloud backup capabilities, block volume, there's specific schedules that are available, or whether they want to leverage your own backup software like either Commvault or NetBackup. And we have implemented both. So in situations where customers want more flexibility, the ability to track their backups and have better, more robust reporting on their backup, a third-party tool is always preferred, and we've gone with either Commvault or NetBackup in both cases, depending on what licenses the customer already has. Any questions? I think we can pause here for questions before moving to the next topic.
Srinivas, there's one question.
Sure.
How can we ensure compatibility between on-premise and the cloud deployments?
I could repeat the question again if you don't mind.
How can we assure compatibility between on-premise and cloud deployments?
So I just want to understand the definition of compatibility here. I mean, ultimately, it's data transfer. So this is, if integration is a question, then there's definitely capabilities available. So, sticking with the EBS migration to Oracle Cloud, integration comes in the form of either Cloud SOA, or OIC, Oracle Integration Cloud. So those are ways of making sure that your cloud and your on-prem applications, whatever integration they had prior to the migration, that continues. If the question is more about extending in communication, then there's multiple ways that you can connect your cloud to your on-prem applications. In the case of AWS, it's Direct Connect. In the case of OCI, it is Fast Connect, and I believe it's Express Route in Azure. Or you can use VPN. So step one, the connectivity between on-prem and cloud. Step two, the integration of the applications. But if they can elaborate on, whoever asked the question, they can elaborate on what compatibility means. We can probably delve in a little more.
Okay, I think I have another question, Srinivas. Can I go with that, or?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is related to the slide which is currently in display, Srinivas, with respect to data protection. What if the customers have data that must remain on-premise for regulatory compliance?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we've done is, if the customer is completely exiting a data center, an existing colo, what we can do is we can procure a short-term colo elsewhere, if that is possible. And keep in mind that object storage is accessible from anywhere. Object storage is a cloud service in itself. So you don't need to be in cloud to access object storage. But the data must reside on-prem, then you got to be able to pull from object storage down to local storage. So it's kind of a two-step process. What you'll have to do is take your backups to cloud, to object storage, and from the object storage, pull it down to your on-prem, which means you'll have to have some on-prem presence, at that point, which is where a third-party tool like Commvault or NetBackup can certainly help. Right. Now the data cannot. So if the person can elaborate on the question, and if data just cannot leave premises, that's a different issue, and we have to solve it kind of differently. Anything else, Gayatri?
I guess that's it for now. Srinivas, we can continue.
Okay, thank you. So the next consideration is security, right? Obviously, when you're on-prem is a different model versus when you're in cloud. However, there's no reason, in many ways, cloud is actually more secure. Two reasons. One is all cloud providers inherently have firewall, DDoS prevention, all those capabilities inherent to their cloud services. But what most customers will do is on top of that, add their own layers of security. So keys over there is one is data encryption, making sure that all your data is encrypted at rest, in flight. That is one. And then when you have data encryption, you can store your keys, again, in cloud or on-prem. Vulnerability management. Vulnerability management is your ability to handle exposures. This is, again, key in cloud. I think it's a huge benefit where, systems can be put in place to identify vulnerabilities and take appropriate actions. So that could be either applying patches or closing down certain ports that are shutting down certain processes that are not required. The next is endpoint detection and response. So EDR is a step above typical antivirus. Typical antivirus products will look for a signature and will quarantine a process or a file that's got that signature. EDR is a little more intelligent. It looks for anomalies in processes, anomalies in the way memory and CPU is being consumed, and will take an action accordingly. It doesn't rely on a signature or a known known file or problem. The next is CASB, which is Cloud Access Security Broker. Anytime you have your employees or your customer base or your end users accessing cloud services, it's very important that they access only the cloud services that they have the authority to. They only access those cloud services that corporation has given them, the rights for. And that's where CASB comes into play to make sure that there's no accidental redirection to another cloud or another service. So it's to really protect the end user from going to a spurious cloud. The next is web application firewall. Typical firewalls will look at ports and will limit routing. But when you're looking at a web service, when you're looking at today's applications, they're typically URL driven. So now you need to have firewalls that are able to traverse URLs and prevent attacks based on a URL. So it's further up the stack, if you look at network layers. And of course, ultimately, network security as well. So your current infrastructure, requirements for firewall, requirements for isolating your different applications and networks, that comes into play. And there's multiple features in cloud that can be leveraged to provide firewall, load balancing, and routing. So again, continuing with the EBS discussion that we had earlier, what is, and kind of now going into business continuity and DR, this is what a typical deployment would look like. An application with production, test, and this is your DR/production in the event that primary production fails. So you'll have these across different regions. If you're using Oracle Cloud, typically in North America, it's Ashburn and Phoenix. And as you can see, you've got this fast connect here, connecting your production to your on-prem data centers or your corporate offices. And then you've got your DR site over here. And this could be, the DR from here to here could depend on, whether you want to use a tool or whether you want to use native Oracle Data Guard capabilities or something as simple as rsync. Your solution will be driven by your recovery time objective, your recovery point objective. Like I said, the more aggressive your RT and RPO, the more likely you'll have to use a tool-based solution. So now that we've gone, through the first 6 considerations, all of this comes together as a migration plan. So everything has been taken into consideration so far. Ultimately the goals are to minimize your application downtime when you do the cutover from production to cloud, and to automate as much as possible. If you're using EBS, then obviously you can use EBS Cloud Manager. You could use transportable tablespace, like I mentioned earlier. You could use a backup and restore, where you take a full backup, copy to cloud, bring up a database, and do the delta. Other considerations here will be dependent on how fast your network is, the volume of data you've got. And of course, like we discussed earlier, integration comes into play. That in turn will drive the order in which you migrate your applications based on the functionality, the business unit. And more often than not, you're not going to just migrate one application. You're going to migrate several applications, or dozens potentially, and they will be done in waves. So it's very likely that you'll have groups of applications. You'll migrate the first group, let that stabilize, followed by group 2 and group 3. And typically what we see is all the infrastructure services, DNS, identity, all of those get moved first. So you have the plumbing essentially available in cloud, and then you start migrating your enterprise and non-enterprise workloads as well. So you pause again here. Any questions, Gayatri?
Okay, there's one question where the migration plan objectives mentioned with respect to the customer, or what are we talking about here?
Yeah, so it's both, right? Anytime you have a cloud journey, it's a strategic partnership. So these are considerations the entire team, the customer plus the integrator plus whoever the cloud provider has to make together. Right? It's not isolated. So, but ultimately, yes, the customer will drive some of these, but it's up to the person who develops the solution to take all those factors into consideration. So it really is a teamwork. So we can change what the customer is deploying today. The version of EBS, we can change what they're doing today in terms of the operating system infrastructure. What we can do is decide and influence and recommend, I guess, what the end state will look like, and ultimately how you get from point A to point B.
Sure, Srinivas. Thank you. There's one more question. We mentioned about a lot of customizations being a part of while migrating the cloud, right? So while such apps, how do we optimize these apps before they move to the cloud? Is there any kind of optimization required before they are moved to cloud, migrated to cloud?
Yeah, so Vikas, you want to take that, or I can pick it up as well?
Yeah. So is it specific to EBS or any other custom applications that you built did something that is mentioned, or?
We can look at EBS, yeah.
Okay. So if it is in perspective to EBS, ideally we use certain appliances, the tools which is provided by Oracle, and our own tools we have wherein it suggests like what are the changes that is going. I mean, what are the changes that is needed to be taken care or look for on your current customization stack, and how can that be changed or retrofitted when it comes to the target version. So that way we can see whether we have to change it or we have to rebuild it. So those sort of things that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah, I can give an example as well, right? So let's look at EBS. So we use our own products that, again, we sell as well. SuneraTech sells it. One is called Cloud Tester, the other is called Ringmaster. These products go hand in hand. They're able to identify current customization so that post-migration, we can validate and confirm that the customizations have been extended or have been moved over or copied over. Sometimes when you do an upgrade, you lose a lot of the customizations, and these products can help capture the customization so that they can be applied again post-migration. So essentially, use these products, test out all the functionality, take a benchmark, identify all the customizations, categorize those, complete the migration, identify customizations that have not been able to be migrated as part of the initial step. You can apply them again, and typically it's creating new tables, new views, probably apply new procedures. So you put the customization back again. Then you can use a cloud tester to do another benchmark and confirm that your response, your functionality is equal to what it was prior to migration.
Sure. Thanks, Srinivas. I think we can continue.
Sure. So next is zero cost cloud migration. You know, when companies want to, IT wants to migrate to cloud, one of the biggest challenges is what is known as a migration bubble. So, you know, you have a cloud environment, which is your target. This is your current environment. There's a spend today with your current provider, current solution, what have you. And if you want to migrate to cloud, yes, eventually there is significant ROI and cost savings, but there's this bubble that could last multiple months, depending on how many applications and how big your footprint is. And this is a challenge for many companies because this could be a significant bubble. So we know that IT and business want to leverage the benefits of cloud, both in terms of all the functionality we have discussed, flexibility and the costs, but not many are willing to invest this delta amount because they already, the pockets are pretty tight already. So what SuneraTech has done is introduce this program called Zero Cost Cloud Migration. What happens essentially in Zero Cost Cloud Migration is we will work with the cloud provider. We will procure all the cloud infrastructure on behalf of the customers. We will migrate all the applications, irrespective of whether it's going to take 3, 6, or 9 months, or even longer. But we will not invoice the customer during the migration. So they will not see that bubble. Typically what happens is we enter into a managed services contract with the customer. So the post-migration, we support infrastructure and or database and or application. And essentially what happens then is from this, where you see a bubble of zero cost, you come to more of this, which is where, you know, you're not paying anything extra. You don't see that bubble and you have zero investment. And then you just continue paying SuneraTech through the life of the managed services contract. 2 advantages. One is obviously the bubble goes away. Second, more importantly, is during this phase, it's a very predictable invoice, and it covers everything. It's a single invoice that covers services, cloud infrastructure, any tools deployed, all the licensing, everything kind of covered with one invoice, itemized, but certainly covered in one invoice. So you get the benefits of cloud without that bubble. So it's now IT can move forward without having to go to the CEO for more funds. And this has actually been leveraged. We have had a customer has migrated, 90 plus workloads to cloud, right? And they went from a 10.4 per annum cost down to 4.4. As you can see, the reduction over here, going from IBM data center and support down to, SuneraTech and Oracle Cloud. The one thing that most people do catch when they look at this graph is the increased cost of security. Twofold. One is they're in cloud, so that inherently requires a little more security. But two, when we moved from on-prem to cloud, we gave them a lot more security in terms of encryption and capabilities that they did not have earlier. So whether you're on cloud or on-prem, you're still exposed to vulnerabilities, are still exposed to virus. We implemented a lot of those tools that they didn't have earlier, which is why the security went up. In terms of landscape, they migrated Oracle EBS, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, pretty much the entire spectrum, right, including some SAP components. The drivers, they were in a data center that was being managed by IBM, supported by IBM, and that contract was coming to expiration. And they were looking to reduce costs and also modernize the infrastructure. If not, they end up in this cycle of tech refresh every 3 to 5 years. So this way, once they move to cloud, they don't have to worry about tech refresh anymore. They can focus more on application functionality and data-driven decisions. So from that point, typically how we partner a cloud journey, discovery and assessment is kind of where we focused on today, right? The current spend, all the considerations, all of that comes into play. Based on that, we put a TCO analysis together, given the current footprint, given the target state, X amount of cost to get there, and Y amount of cost to sustain it there. Typically from that point on, it goes to proof of value, where we begin preparation for production by executing the migration of one environment, typically some kind of a non-product environment, a dev or a test environment that gets migrated to cloud. That gives us the further insight into how long it's going to take, what needs to be considered, all the integrations are tested. So it's kind of a dry run as well. And then based on what we find there, of course, like we discussed earlier, we put the roadmap together for migration, the different waves, then moving on to the actual execution and ultimately cutting over to operations. Pause here for any questions.
Is it right to say that the migration considerations which have been mentioned, the 7-point plan, is spread across this journey?
A lot of it comes up here. A lot of that assessment, is done in the discovery phase upfront. But yes, it does influence everything, right? Everything we discussed today, all the 7 considerations need to be considered upfront, but they will impact every stage over here, right? Your current operating system will decide, your current footprint will decide how expensive it's going to be to migrate, and what the footprint of your Oracle cloud or any cloud is going to be. So that'll drive the TCO. The proof of value will, decide how you test your integrations, what additional products need to be brought on, and considered. The migration roadmap will be driven by how quickly we expect to complete the migration, the number of waves. So everything is documented upfront, but yes, it has an impact to all of these phases.
Okay, there's one more question. Have you had cases where being on-premise has been less costlier than going to cloud, and how have you handled that situation?
Yeah, there's occasionally a couple of cases where the customer is on some really unique hardware which is cheaper than going to cloud. Ultimately, what happens is that folks need to take into account total cost of ownership, right? Not just the server, storage, network. Take into account the data center facilities. If it's a colo or lease facility, take into account the administration overhead of managing all this infrastructure. So, you have folks who are focusing on replacing disk drives, folks who are worrying about, pulling tapes out and vaulting them. And a lot of those challenges go away. So that's the first thing, if you're looking purely at cost. The second thing is, the way the customer wants to be. So if you recall the 4 horizons, it's about data monetization, it's about a vision. And inherently, on-prem is going to always be less agile and less scalable than moving to cloud, right? So yes, we have had situations where customers, find their TCO lower, but for a little more, right, in terms of moving to cloud, they get considerable more flexibility and a lot more in terms of the growth. From a business perspective, that's where, the TCO becomes broader than just IT. It becomes more of a business decision. And that's where the value is.
Okay, sure. There's one more question. How do we generally manage governance and security in cloud migration?
So we will work with the customer's CISO in that organization, security organization. We will understand their requirements for compliance. We'll understand the requirements for data privacy, encryption, like I mentioned earlier, and all the qualities they want. So one of the things we'll do, as you'll see in the next steps actually here, interestingly, is a complete cloud readiness assessment, which includes a cybersecurity assessment as well. So cloud readiness assessment will essentially go through all those considerations plus a few more. We'll go deeper into security, into DR, business continuity, and then come up essentially with a game plan on what the migration should look like. So security is twofold. One is what is standard and required for cloud. 2 is what the customer wants over and above, that foundation that we build. Sometimes you have customers who want more than the tools we typically deploy. So we implemented penetration testing, certainly EDR, vulnerability management, and multiple EDR products depending on which works best with which operating system. So again, cloud readiness assessment, of which cybersecurity assessment is a part of, and you can use the CSI model, the CIS model rather, which has got 20 domains that you look at when it comes to security, 5 foundational, and the others are built on top of it. Any other questions, Gayatri?
Yeah, there's one more. What is the risk management plan generally for a cloud services provider?
That's a good question. So again, if you take into consideration all the different things we've discussed, right? One is make sure you know exactly, have a very good idea, accurate picture of the current state, right? That's the first thing. That will make sure that your end state is accurate. Your end state is only going to be as accurate as the information you get up front. So if any information is incorrect or missing, that's going to impact your solution. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is we do emphasize on proof of value. We do emphasize on a waived approach, approach of using waves rather when migrating, so that we're not risking the entire fleet at once, right? The third thing is, when you're talking about risk, what was the question again? What was the word that we use? Governance and?
Governance
risk management.
Risk management.
Right. So when you think about that, it comes to twofold, right? One is security, typically. And second is that, it comes in terms of timeline and the costs. So again, if you have all your considerations done correctly up front, if your assessment is accurate, then you can dot all the I's and cross all the T's and be prepared. The second thing is, over the 700 plus workloads we have migrated, we have developed multiple databases of potential issues one can run into, application cloud combination. And so we have that as well, which is, proactively considered. Ultimately, you have to, ensure that you do a proof of value, migrate in waves, and work with the business. One thing I don't think I emphasize is the post-migration testing and UAT, that is key as well. So it's a combination of automation tools, it's a combination of business analysts, but that is key. And the faster you can do the testing, the less risk there is to timeline. The loaded question, actually.
So can you elaborate on a few common mistakes that generally people do while understanding Oracle Cloud or while migrating to Oracle Cloud?
Yeah, that's a good question. So mistake number one is typically not sizing correctly, right? They do not necessarily understand the different shapes, the different combinations, the sizing. So what happens then is they can mess up on the performance or the licensing. So that conversion ratio, especially when migrating from on-prem, comparing current CPU core and mapping them to, corresponding, virtual machines in cloud, that is one mistake. The next thing is not factoring the fact that, whether we have Fast Connect in Oracle Cloud or Direct Connect in AWS, those are services that run on top of a provider's network. And that needs to be factored into the project plan. So Fast Connect, yes, or Direct Connect for that matter, is a push button provisioning, but it requires a pipe already built. And that can require significant lead time. So we have seen challenges there. The third is when it comes to, customizations, right? Unless they're properly cataloged, unless they're properly documented and captured, folks tend to miss the customizations. And, post-production becomes a little more difficult to bring them in. You're kind of under the microscope at that point. So those are three. The fourth I can think of is, not really knowing all the options. So when you're migrating database to cloud, there's a database cloud service, there's Exadata cloud service, there's just regular VMs on which you run database. And sometimes that's not well thought of. And, you can find that you end up in a situation where things are not compatible. So for example, autonomous data warehouse is really good for certain applications and capabilities, but you can't run your EBS or your PeopleSoft against ADW, right? Those run very nice against database cloud service. So that's one. The other thing is, probably underestimating the requirements when doing cross-platform migration. So this is where we have seen biggest challenges when moving from Spark Solaris or AIX to Oracle Linux, which is, you save a ton on licensing and support fee, but if that's not properly thought out, you can run into multiple issues during the database migration. So the 5 that come to mind, I'm sure there's a dozen more.
Sure. This question is about zero cost migration. It wanted to understand what all does it encompass? Does it take care of all the custom applications migration also, or is there a specific requirement to take care while indulging in zero cost?
A good question. And zero cost is all encompassing. Everything required for migration, right from the analysis, all the considerations, cataloging them, developing the end solution, taking into account all the customizations required that need to be ported over. Now, like I said earlier, typically a migration doesn't include an upgrade unless you're moving from an unsupported environment, but a lot of that is handled up front. But yes, the short answer is everything required for migrating, all the applications and scope, all the underlying cloud infrastructure required for that, all the third-party licenses required for backup or disaster recovery or security, everything is bundled into zero cost cloud migration. There's, I guess, very, very few exceptions, and I can't think of any right now, but for the most part, everything is fully covered. And it's not limited to Oracle application workloads. So if you're moving, many times you have customers who have dozens of workloads, and 60-70% of them move to one cloud. Microsoft Office could move to Azure. All of that is covered as well. So it's a multi-cloud solution. So it's not limited to one cloud either. Whether you end up in a hybrid cloud or the multi-cloud solution, ZCCM covers everything. Vikas, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I want to add one most important thing that that needs really more uh, input. Like everybody takes the cutover and go live very simple, but that needs to be planned very, very well. So that for some customers there would be very minimal downtime depending on the critical applications sometimes. So maybe 6 hours, 8 hours, or 12 hours, or 16 hours. Depends on the type of business and type of applications that you're moving from on-prem to cloud. So I think the most important thing you plan, the more number of iterations that you do for the cutover and go live, it would be better. Thank you.
No, absolutely. The cutover plan is key, and the windows you pick for that, accounting for the downtime, the communication that needs to. So there certainly has to be multiple layers of project management and program management involved. So going back to I think the previous question, which was the mistakes people make, is not the devil's in the detail. It really is in this case.
Yep.
But we do have any other questions, Gayatri?
Yeah, just one last question, I think. We have time for one last question. Yeah, I guess I think we are good, Srinivas.
Okay. So, we do want to just bring you, to your attention. We have other webinars coming up. There's one next week on focusing on data center cloud migration on the 18th, if I'm mistaken. The 5 reasons that we discussed earlier, the more strategic reasons, on why to migrate EBS to cloud, the RPA, the automation, that is also going to be highlighted. The next is based on all the experiences you've got in migrating EBS, the very specific challenges associated with that we'll be covering. So this webinar here, the zero cost, is coming up on the 18th. And these two are target for January. And, feel free to reach out to SuneraTech, to discuss a cloud readiness assessment, cybersecurity assessment, so we can get started, look at these considerations in a structured fashion, and the corresponding solution and plan as well.
Yeah, Srinivas, is there an email ID you can reach out to? I think
yes, it should be on this. If not, can we post this in the group chat? Is a group chat we can post everything in Q&A, I guess?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll do that.
Yep.
So I think the one last question was whether this applies, this migration steps applies not just for EBS and PeopleSoft and ERP, or others like HCM, Taleo as well. Does this apply to them as well?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, we use EBS as an example, but yes, if you're migrating PeopleSoft, right? If I go back to that one slide with the versions, in the case of EBS, it's this list over here that we go back here really quick, right? So this is the target stack, and this is the roadmap, right? If you look at PeopleSoft, Hyperion, each of them have their own stack, and for each of, but this over here, these steps are pretty generic. If it's supported, whether it be 12.2 or 9.2 in the case of PeopleSoft, or whatever be the version for HCM, these are typically the steps you'll follow. You just got to make sure you know the target stack and what is supported.
Yeah, one more thing I would like to add here. It's not only just the EBS or ERP applications. We do have expertise in moving workloads like Chronos, Taleo, and the workforce applications kind of applications.
So thanks, Srinivas. Thanks, Vikas. Thank you so much all for joining this webinar. We will be, to all the participants who attended this webinar, we'll be sharing a recording link post this webinar. Thanks so much. Thanks all again. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.